Right.
Hello again, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. We've got another special guest here with us, Amal Hussein from Stripe. I'm going to let her introduce herself. Hi, Amal.
Hi. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. It's very early where I am. It's like lunchtime for Jen. So if I look a little sleepy or puffy face, that's why. But I'm very excited. It's a great way to start my morning. My name is Amal Hussein. I'm a software engineer and senior lead engineer. Currently a staff engineer at Stripe. Have been kind of in a tech lead and general kind of principal role for a little while now, and I really enjoy writing software. I enjoy the problems of kind of leading teams, and just kind of have found a place that lets me exercise all the things I love. Yeah.
Great. You joined Stripe, was it late last year or has it been a year already?
Yeah, joined Stripe about a couple months ago. So fairly new, but in a very fire hose mode because I'm learning a ton. But yeah, when you're a lead, there's no kind of smooth onboarding, You're just kind of like you're
They
supposed to be
want
here
yeah,
yesterday.
they want you to be productive. Yes, you're right. And yes, we needed this yesterday.
Exactly. So it's just jump right in. But yeah, so what's really fun about my job too is that in addition to kind of working on awesome problems, kind of helping people and businesses all around the world kind of you know move their money and deal with like a lot of their kind of financial infrastructure in
Yeah.
it's a little more turnkey. I get to work with phenomenal people. The company itself is just really has a very ambitious mission, which is to increase the GDP of the web, and so that's just like a phenomenal opportunity as well, to kind of really be pushing web infrastructure financially. Um,
Yeah.
so it's very cool.
Yeah. Big goals.
Yes, big goals. Yes.
Exciting. Okay. So obviously we're connected on Twitter and we kind of follow each other. And sometimes I see you tweeting about mathematics and seem to be very excited, by that, which is actually something I quite enjoy seeing because I also have a degree in mathematics and I'm not sure if your degree is math or something else. You want to maybe just talk about how you got started in tech?
Sure. Yeah. That's a great segue. So I originally started studying biomedical engineering. I went to an engineering school, and so was kind of surrounded by people that were doing all kinds of STEM fields. A lot of software engineers in my life when I was a student, and
Mhm.
when I discovered software, I kind of really took a pretty big pivot into into that world. But before software is biomedical engineering with a minor in math, and I was very lucky as a young, when I was in high school, I went to high school in Dubai, and because of that, I had the opportunity to kind of really take a lot of classes like calculus and kind of advanced math and science classes a little earlier in life. And so when I got to school, I got to either started slightly advanced classes or have or test out of some classes. So I got to have a little more fun, I think, than do the boring stuff. When I got to college. And so yeah, so if I could do it all over again, I would definitely get a degree in math and not computer science or biomedical engineering. I think math, now that I'm older, I realize just how foundational it is, but also just how fun it is. And so I've started taking some Khan Academy classes kind of part time just to just to kind of get myself back into the swing of things. But yeah, love math. Not studying math, but transitioned into software from biomedical engineering, and yeah, software was the fastest way to solve problems. So that's where I
Yeah.
that's where I
Yeah.
landed. Yeah.
It is exciting because it gives us the opportunity to design new solutions like every day. And I think you really, really love that part of the job, right? Thinking about how to get, I don't know, companies or the organization from point A to point B. Do you want to, I know you talked about that the other time we were chatting. Do you want to maybe describe, like what you do day to day? And what are the exciting things you're involved with at Stripe, maybe, or even in the past where you've been involved in like really interesting projects because you've got a long history, in tech, and you're obviously more involved in the I would say the front end the web, ecosystem. So there's a lot to talk about. So
Yeah, yeah.
you wanna get started with?
Sure, sure. So yeah, so I started out my career kind of in ed tech, working actually more on very kind of full stack applications. Actually, originally started out doing back end code and Python, transitioned into like Java, and then from there JavaScript. And once I discovered front end and UI architecture in particular, I think that's really kind of where my passion was, because it was just
Yeah,
the pieces of code that were a little more user facing, which was fun. But I still kind of transition. Like I'm still very focused on like front end and middleware architectures, API design. So everything to do with kind of like how things get to the front end. That's really like my kind of expertise, and how to distribute them in a performant way, etc. But yeah, started out in ed tech. I spent some time doing work in the standards world when I was at Boku. And also kind of that was my first big exposure to, you know, what is it like for, what is it like to really think about the scale of the web, and, working lower level on interoperability issues. That was like a phenomenal opportunity that really expanded my thinking. I also spent some time at NPM as an engineering manager, and most recently, I was a principal software engineer, at Indigo, where I got to lead a team that was working on transportation logistics for agriculture. So we kind of think Uber for agriculture. It's a really interesting late stage unicorn startup that is just really trying to make the world a better place through lots of advancements in technology that support different folks in the agriculture industry. So it's a pretty bold mission. And yeah, and I guess while I was at NPM, I got to kind of see the scale of the web. So really working on node services and microservices under the hood. So not doing really anything to do with front end while I was there, but really just supporting the infrastructure that so many developers use. And it was such a really interesting challenge because, being upstream from developers, right? When you're supporting engineers that are supporting everyone else, like it's a whole different challenge and a whole different set of things to consider. And so that was just phenomenal. And I feel like at Stripe, we're in that same boat where our customers are primarily engineers, but at the same time, like we're integrating in with engineers at businesses and like, that support like millions and billions of customers, And so being upstream from that is also just like phenomenal, but just from a different lens,
yeah,
as opposed to kind of like developers that are trying to get their package distribution and their open source packages or private packages. We're now kind of helping engineers, write infrastructure that's, supporting kind of their financial services for their business. So it's just a phenomenal challenge. And I think for me, like, I've mentioned this to you before, like I consider myself just more of an expert problem solver, more so than a software engineer, right? I think as I've gone longer in my career, I've realized like it's not about the language or the framework or even like the front end or back end. Like it's really like, what problem are you trying to solve? What's the
yeah,
right tool for it? That's the way I've kind of gone about approaching my career thus far, because it's frameworks and language, all these things kind of really change. I think languages are a little more foundational, but in general, like the how you solve the problem shifts, right? The best practices shifts, the tools shift.
yeah,
But I think, once you understand kind of the foundations of like how to learn, how, what are the kind of metrics, or what's the rubric for choosing your tools? How do you frame a problem? Once you learn those kind of foundations, you're able to run and kind of repeat that over time. When evaluating new tools for new kinds of problems. So I'm a huge fan of kind of foundational knowledge, more so because foundational knowledge helps you build on the kind of like tool du jour, best practice of the day. It helps you kind of contextualize that. So
So for someone who kind of wants to follow the same, track as you did, where do you think they'd start? If, for example, they're like new to tech, and maybe not want to focus on, like the front end web stuff, but maybe focus on, architecture, infrastructure. Where do you think they should start if they're new? or even if they're already in the ecosystem, and doing front end, back end work, what do you think they should really like equip themselves with, to kind of follow the same track?
Yes, that makes sense. Um, I so that's a great question. I think there's a few things like being new to our industry means you're being overwhelmed with a lot of different knowledge, right? And this is, I hate to break it to you, but this isn't something that's going to change over time. Like
Yeah.
this is still a constant for me and others and who've been in this industry a while. Um, you essentially. You're stuck with trying, you have like 24 hours in a day. If you have a life, you have, hopefully 8 hours of sleep, you know hopefully 8 hours to
8 hours.
yourself during a week. Yes. Jen is like, what, 8 hours? Talk to
Four
me. What,
hours.
8 hours? Yeah, no, hopefully
Not
under
around 24 hours most of the time. But
right?
anyway,
You've got sleep, you've got like rest time, your body, you need social time and everything, and then you have work time, right? So you have limited hours in the day and lots of information. And so how do you prioritize that, right? So one is kind of like really kind of figuring out when you're new in this industry, like what excites you. Are you excited more by, writing server code? Are you excited more by design? Are you excited more by kind of architecture? Are you excited about distribution?
yeah.
And the way I like to kind of break these up, Jen, is three buckets. So there's people involved with pre-code. There's a lot of like work that goes into even before a line of code is written, right? There's product work, research work, user experience research, UXR, you might call it, right? There's all kinds of work that goes into pre, and even just some design, architecture design sometimes happens because you need to support those stakeholders and helping them make decisions. And then there's like what happens when you're actually ready to write code, right? So there's people writing front end code, back end code. There's sometimes CI distribution code, right? So there's all this work during, and then there's a whole group of people that are kind of involved in the like distribution and security process, right? And the operations process, right? So DevOps, right? How do we get that code that was written to the cloud? How do we make sure that that code is secure and not, right? So there's a lot of like release and observability work, right? So that there's kind of, those are general three buckets that I would consider kind of like pre, during, post. So figuring out like which part excites you, right? Like someone who's a DevOps engineer is really not necessarily involved with the code as it's being written, but they're thinking more about the distribution and scale and like reliability problems, right? So once this code is on the cloud, how do I make sure that like we have good uptime, and how do we make sure that like we can we have resilience, and we can repeat our process, if there's a like all of our servers go down, and like like how do I make sure that we're back up and we don't skip a beat. There's so many interesting challenges like depending on where in the pipeline you're most interested, right? So figure out like what you think you're most excited about, and know that like it's okay, like for you to change your mind. Like it's okay for you to be excited about one thing and then do it and realize, nah, not for me. It's a trial by fire kind of process. So it's okay. Like I give you permission to fire yourself if you think you're like not enjoying this or bad at this, right? It takes a while for people to find their niche and to find what they like, and sometimes people actually sometimes you're just not in the right environment. Sometimes maybe you're really enjoying writing front end code, but you don't really like writing front end code at this particular place in this code base because perhaps maybe the team is challenging, or the code is written in a way that's making it difficult for you to learn as a newbie. So don't be too hard on yourself. Be kind to yourself, but also just know that it's okay to change your mind. I think approaching problems with like an open mind, and approaching these things kind of in a way that's where you're not too critical of yourself is really the best approach, because this stuff is really hard. It's hard for experienced people as well. We're dealing with the same problems. We just kind of fail faster, I would say.
Yeah,
And
I
we
think we were talking about this the other day as well, where we are saying we learned how to grow thick skin basically,
yes,
in order to
correct.
survive in some of the environments we've been in. Yeah, so
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, you do. I think the thick skin problem is like, secondary to kind of like once you find what you like, that like, as somebody who might be underrepresented, that, you sometimes some of the challenges you're dealing with aren't even about your technical abilities, so just like, oh, maybe somebody's underestimating you, or maybe somebody's right. And so, yeah, there's lots of tiny little paper cuts. And what sucks is, it's sometimes most of the time, it's not even people trying to be intentionally harmful. There's just unconscious bias that people have. Right.
Yeah.
And so, if you're a manager, or, or a leader in an organization, it's really important for you to try to see what you can do to push that envelope forward a little bit, where you can get training for your team, and, you know, have some diversity, and inclusion and belonging kind of awareness for folks,
Yeah.
just because yeah, I mean, it's really challenging. Everybody has bias. It's no one person in the world that doesn't have bias, right? So it's important for people to be conscious of their bias, especially in the workplace, and how it can affect others. So yeah, so it's really sucks, but yeah, there's a level of kind of, like, yeah, for me, I just try to kind of get to that point faster, where like someone realizes, oh, you're actually competent. Like, you're not like I know you don't look the archetype, but like, oh, actually, you know what you're doing. Like, I try to kind of rush,
Yeah.
accelerate that point. How do we get there faster? That's really where I
Let
am
me,
these days.
bias over with and yeah, done with, and yes, let's just get done and do some good work.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I agree with you about managers investing time in terms of educating their team, basically, because obviously overall that will help the team, not just one person. So yeah, I think continuous investment in educating the team with regard to diversity, inclusion, unconscious bias and all that, it's necessary, definitely.
Very much.
um yeah, so you seem to be like me. You seem to be loving, doing a lot of things
Mhm.
all at the same time. Have you always been like that, or have you realized that at some point, maybe I need to change some of the things I'm doing
Yeah. Yeah.
because I focus on one thing and yeah, maybe not others.
Yeah,
Any?
that's a good question. Yeah. So yeah, 'cause I didn't mention this earlier, but yeah, I do a lot of community education work. So I'm on a podcast called JS Party, which, where we talk about, all kinds of different intersections, for software development, specifically kind of geared towards, I would say a front end audience, but people listen to us that do more than front end.
Yeah,
And I think for me, work life balance is one of those things where, my passion in life is really kind of problem solving. Community is like a really core part of like my value system, in the sense that like, I gain a lot from open source and working, with folks, just in a capacity where I'm able to kind of actually be a source of, inspiration for others who don't look like the stereotype, right? So I think representation matters. So it's this really interesting thing where like you think you're giving back, or you're doing this thing for others, but you actually get back. So it's kind of selfish, right? I feel like I actually get way more out of doing community work than I even realized. But in terms of like, how to balance all of that stuff, I think there's no, I don't know, like, I don't think there's a right answer, or I don't think anyone's figured it out yet. I don't know if you have. I haven't. I just kind of really, at this point, I try to, yeah, I manage my energy more so than anything, not my time, if that makes sense. So it's just really important to be like mindful of your energy, and like what you actually have the capacity for doing energy wise, not so much even just your time, because sometimes if you're like really excited and passionate about something, it's really easy to, yeah, like, and
to get so
it's not
invested.
an energy drain. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
fine. But I think it's like when it's an energy drain, that's when you really have to kind of like step away. So you have to kind of like listen to your, like, listen to your inner clock. That's what I've done. And
yeah,
another kind of maybe technique is, I try to do things in sprints. So if I'm on, like, for a little while, I like, I take a break, right? So it's like on 2 weeks, off a week, right? I don't continuously, like, I'm not in go, 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 go mode all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to like have rest and build in like rest cycles.
Yeah, I love when you tweet about I can remember something that you're having fun with your husband, or doing this and doing that. So that it's nice to see that. And I think it's a good example to set out there that yes, we have a life outside outside tech. Yes, and I think what you were mentioning to me before that you kind
Yeah,
of cut down on some of the meetups that you were doing. I guess it's yeah, it's in line with what you're saying, that you kind of need to check the temperature and what's going on with your energy and all that.
for sure.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think it's hard. Like, it's very hard to. So I think our industry is very overwhelming in the sense that like there's so much incoming and there's so much you could possibly do at any given moment. You can learn a new skill. You can go to a conference. You can do this. You can do that. There's like literally like there's so many things. And I think once you realize that like it's a nonstop funnel party that's like 24/7 because of we're global community and there's the internet is the thing that doesn't ever turn off, right? um, Once you realize that you can manage your relationship with the internet and with learning and with the community and with your job, and right, like work is always going to be there, community is always going to be there. I think it's a matter of kind of making sure that like you're in a good situation to kind of contribute and be engaged, right? Like you have to really take care of yourself first in that sense. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I don't think it's something that like I have a perfect answer for yet. It's always something that like I'm improving and trying to kind of be mindful of. But I think for me lately, like just managing my energy has been just a huge thing, huge, huge win
That's,
already.
that's really a good message to send to people who are watching this video, because at the end of the day, as you said, you have to take care of yourself, because if you're taking care of a community and you're actually not in a good place, how can you really do that effectively? So
Right.
that, I think that's a very very good tip for.
Yeah, and it just goes back to science too, right? Like rest is like necessary for work, like you need to rest at all levels, like mentally, physically, even like spiritually. You need to just be, have rest in order to kind of come back and be engaged. So
Yeah.
so yeah.
The other day I was just talking to someone about psychological safe space. I think everyone needs that.
Yes.
It's not something that's easy to understand, because people seem to some people think that because you look cheerful, your tweets look
Oh
so.
yes. Yes.
People think that, oh, she's had it perfect, but it's not. For example, like this, the war on Ukraine, like it's affecting us differently, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult for some people to understand that, oh, okay, actually some people are definitely struggling some aspects of that. It's difficult to explain to the world how it's affecting you. So yeah,
Yeah.
we just need to all just realize that we all need some safe space.
Yeah, no, I honestly, so I couldn't agree with you more. I also think, yeah, it's a really good point you bring up about social media, Jen, because, yeah, social media does not always reflect, right? Like what you see
Mm,
is not always reflective of reality. It's a curated image, a curated
yeah.
life. And so I think that's another thing, that causes a lot of FOMO in our industry for people, because they're like, oh, this person either seems to know everything, or, oh, this person,
Mm,
they seem to do everything, right? It's like a very curated life. Another thing that's really unfortunate is, burnout is very common in our industry,
yeah.
um, and so sometimes, yeah, you know, we don't have, um, people have to learn about kind of sustaining their energy. Like they learn it the hard way, right? Like myself included, right? It's not something that is taught to us at school. I think it's very easy to get excited on the hype train and then, just realize like, oh crap, I forgot to kind of manage my energy and now I'm like a little burnt out, right? So that's why like managing your energy and like it's a marathon, not a sprint. Thinking about it with the long-term lens is like really the best way, and that's a good way to approach your learning. That's a good way to approach your career. um you know And just, I really, you should be measuring yourself against your previous self, right? And not, kind of comparing yourself with others, because everybody really in our industry, there's so many different ways that people have come into tech. There's so many different journeys, right? Everyone has their own story. It's really hard to kind of even compare yourself to anyone, really, like, because everyone has their own, it's very snowflake, so and then no one has the same knowledge base either. That's the other thing that I think is very FOMO inducing in tech. Everybody knows something a little different than everybody else, and they learned it a little differently, or they, so unless two people did the exact same thing, found the exact same Google posts, read the exact same, right, like, they're just, that's no such thing as two people that know the exact same thing, right? Everybody knows slightly different things, and there's no expert in everything either, right? So you have to kind of trust in your ability to learn, and that's like the biggest thing. You have to learn how to learn, and like that's your biggest skill and strength, like.
Kind of related to what you were saying earlier, that you can always like change direction if you were going this way and you found that, oh, it's not right, or it's not right for me, or whatever. You can
Right.
said, and I really love that you can fire yourself.
Yeah, you should be able to absolutely fire yourself, and know that, like, you're entering this industry at a great time if you're new to this community, in the sense that, like, there's lots of opportunities for you to learn and grow, and hopefully get hired. It's okay for you to kind of um, be a little picky in, like, how you want to approach that journey, and how you want to, right, like, I mean, yes, it's very competitive to get a job, especially as a new engineer, but if you're willing to put in the time and learn, like, your skills are valuable. So just remember that, like, you do bring something valuable to the table. um, and know that, like, your first job, the company is investing in you as just as much as you're investing in them, even more so, actually, right? So with junior engineers, usually the company's kind of actually putting a little, they're taking a bet on you. They're hoping that you stay there long enough so that, like, you're not going to just be this, like, negative investment, right? Like, you'll be giving back to the company, so they're taking a bet on you. So just know that. I always advise folks, for their first company, to just, I think big teams are good, because big teams make sure that you're not in the critical path. It doesn't mean that a small team or medium team isn't good either. It just means, like, sometimes when you go to a 5-person startup and you're like a new engineer, your job just is critical, right? Like, you're a critical line of path, and critical line of path is tough when you're still learning.
Yeah.
So bigger team gives you a little bit more flex, and a little bit more a flail time is what I call it, right? It gives you time to kind of just uh, get used to things.
Fine.
And,
Yeah.
yeah,
Fine.
you're not, yeah, like, if you're not there, or if you're not figuring things out in a super timely manner, like, no one is going to come knocking down your door, right? Like, they
Mhm.
understand
Yeah.
that you're there to learn, and they're investing in you. So just wherever you go, big, medium, small, just make sure you have a little bit of time to flail, because you're going to flail. So if you're new at this job, new at this industry, just give yourself time to kind of yeah, get used to things, and know that it takes time. It's a process, but you'll, before you know it, you'll be here, like Jen, like, talking to other engineers about their journey, or kicking butt in different ways. So, but yeah, the stuff
Yeah.
takes time.
Definitely.
Be patient with
Definitely.
yourself too.
Yeah. And there's always, as you said, there are also a lot of other paths that one can take. For example, like when I started, at Citigroup a long time ago, I started as a developer, but then I moved on. Like I was in Hong Kong, and I was doing systems analysis, still in tech, because I just love the tech world for some reason. And then I moved on to, for example, I moved to Singapore and Miami, and then I was heading a QA team, and I really enjoyed that, like testing, the systems, whether it's unit testing, integration testing, or we even have this thing called the production verification testing, which was very interesting.
Oh, wow,
Um,
that's cool. Production verification testing sounds very sophisticated. Yeah.
and my team actually, when we went to Miami, we were there for like 8 months, I believe, and we found this very obscure bug, and we had to actually fight. At that time, I was still young, but I was already like leading a team, and we found this bug that. If it went to production, it would have caused the bank embarrassment and millions, probably. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like the tech team, like the development team wasn't believing us, and I had to go there and fight and with people more senior than I to say this release can. And at the time, it wasn't agile. It's it's like if
Wow.
one aspect of this system doesn't work, we cannot implement this whole release. And it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so it was very interesting. So yeah. So we anyway we fought, and then eventually they believed us, believed me because I was the one obviously like, fighting for that for the whole team. And yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, going back to different paths, you can like progress and change roles in tech whenever you want and do whatever's working for you. So talking about like of course we're focused on the women in tech, diversity, inclusion. What are some of the programs that you've seen, whether it's in your previous company or your current company or in the community, that you think are very effective and would be good examples for companies out there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one thing that's been pretty effective is, for at least at Stripe, I would say, is having like ERGs, which are called like employee resource groups, right, for different communities, right. So we have like a community for parents and like an official kind of HR supported community for parents, for folks who identify from the African diaspora, like I do, right. Like so we have a community for Black Stripes. Community for East Asian or South Asian stripes, community for people who are like pro kind of equate, that are trying to kind of like fight for equality in the in the
Mm.
workplace, for example. There's all kinds of just interesting communities like that, and I think what's really important is, in addition to kind of diversity, fostering kind of diversity and inclusion, that also like having a community fosters the belonging, which is, I think, like the most important piece of that equation, right? So having a people who look like you, who share your core values, right? It's a reminder that, like, your workplace is not just for people who don't look like you; it's for people who look like you too, right? You belong here,
Yeah.
and look like you, think like you, right? And so, being a global company, I think that fostering that, like, a safe space for people with different backgrounds, and knowing that, like, we have a shared core mission, right, which is to increase the GDP of the web. That's the goal of our company, but also, like, we have operating principles at our company, which I think are another thing to kind of help unify, right? So you can be different, you can think different, whatever, right? But we have a set of operating principles, like, being curious, being user driven, right? Being open, transparent, etc. Right? Those are some of our operating principles. And then we have our mission, and then, you have your whole other self, right? So you don't have to, like, there isn't, like, you don't belong. It's not like you don't belong at work, right? So you can be who you are and bring what you uniquely bring to the table. But with the lens of, within the lens of our operating principles, focused
Mm.
on driving our mission forward, right? So I think things like that are phenomenal, like having a community in a space, because, especially during these difficult times. I mean, it's been a very difficult few years, Jen, and
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
yeah, with even just this year, now you have a pandemic and you have a war that's going
Oh,
on
I
in
know.
in Europe. It's yeah, just very difficult times. So I think, being conscious of that in the workplace is, like, phenomenal. And, Stripe has definitely, like, I think, been really responsive towards, like, giving people, the time that they need off of work, that giving people the space that they need, the support that they need, just even just having, like, improving, like, a wellness program at work, right? Things like that, that are just like, it kind of shows like, it's not like, people in the workplace are not are they're like they're living in the same planet as you, right? So it's not, so the acknowledgement of our difficult reality is, like, huge, right? You
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
kind of, like,
Yeah.
face this by yourself.
Yeah, and I really hope that companies are not gonna require everyone to be back at the office, like before.
Yeah,
Because I think having like a hybrid model really is good.
yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're
everyone time to focus on themselves, and not, for example, spend I don't know 2 hours commuting, which is really crazy, right? Or more. To be honest, sometimes it's crazy that people are coming It depends on the transport system. Like in London, who live, outside London can get to London quicker just because of the transportation system they're using.
Mhm.
People within London takes longer to actually get from their
To
house.
get to work. Yeah, no, Boston is the same
Oh,
thing. Yeah, sometimes commuting in from the suburbs
yeah.
on a direct train is easier than like commuting in from like one side of the city to the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of hilarious, right? Yeah. I don't think anything in Boston takes like 30 minutes minimum. There's no such thing as like you're 30 minutes either by foot or by train. Like there's
Yeah.
no getting anywhere in less than 30 minutes. So it's
So
pretty
it
sad
is
actually.
amazing. So,
Maybe one day we'll just have like hovercrafts, where we can just like hover
yeah,
around or something.
it's
That would
probably going to be soon, right?
yeah. Soon,
With
if we don't mess up the environment, yes.
all these things that we've seen in movies, they're all becoming real now. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Right.
Okay. Anything else you wanna maybe
Plug
say
or
to
talk
our
about.
audience?
Yeah, I would say really just you belong here. You belong here. We need you. The internet needs to be reflective of the people that are using it, and until we have the people who are writing the software, designing the software, producing the software, right? And being a technologist is not just hands-on keyboard writing code. Being a technologist is a broad spectrum of things. People in our sales org at Stripe are technologists. People who are, right, like anyone who's kind of working within technology, pushing that mission forward, right? Of writing, creating software, put, experiences, that are inclusive, et cetera. Like they're all technologists, right? And so, but you belong here as long as we have like until we have equal representation of technologists that look like the people on Earth, right?
Yeah.
Like we're like there's always going to be injustice and bias in our software. So we need you. You belong here. We're excited to have you. This is a really difficult industry. It's a challenging place to be. Know that like when you're facing challenges, like you're not alone. Like this is unfortunately one of the reasons why people that are technologists are like highly well paid. I think we're paid for our hard work, but also this like there's some stress factor. I feel like there's some like you
Yeah.
know um, we're paid for what is that called? The hazard pay or something, right? There's some like a little bit of hazard pay in there. It's just hard. It's hard.
Even in tech, I think that's yeah, definitely
Yes.
it should be there.
Right.
We with a lot of like difficult, things that meant sometimes, don't have to. So it's yeah, definitely definitely needed. So make sure you demand, good pay out there. Women who are watching this, and allies who are watching this, help women to get there as well, because we don't want to see women living the industry. Here we are trying to get more women in tech, and then we see women leaving. So that's not good, right? We're not
Yeah,
like,
yeah, we have a leaky pipeline issue, right?
yeah,
It's like
we're
get
not
people in
gonna
the
get
pipeline and then there's leaks. It's not
there.
even a secure, right?
Yeah.
And I understand like it's an abrasive place to stay, especially like for me as a senior woman in tech, like you don't see many senior women. There might maybe you'll if you're in an org, you'll see a lot of women that maybe they're
Mhm.
mid-level or junior. A lot of women seem to like transition out after a while, or they don't stay as long, or they move into different roles. But to kind of be hands-on keyboard senior or kind of architecture senior, like you for some reason, there's a like there's lower number of women in tech, lower number of senior women in tech, and I don't think it's not because we don't have women in tech. It's they just don't like stay in those roles, right? It's abrasive, and that's a problem that we need to solve as a community. It's not something that really sucks, like that having to grow thicker skin or having to like all of those things are like unacceptable, right? Like that's
We don't have to, right?
right. And not all workplaces are equal either. Like some places like are phenomenal, right? Like I would say, Stripe is a very like inclusive place, right? I wish all companies were like that, right? Because then maybe we would be able to foster better diversity. But yeah, I mean, we have some serious problems in our industry, and they're not going to be solved without you. So you belong here, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. And know that like challenges that you face are not limited to or strictly because you're a woman. Like our industry as a whole is challenging for everyone, especially new people. And so just be aware that it's not you, it's this industry, and we have to move at a more sustainable pace moving forward. But I don't know how to tell the internet to slow down. But we do need to, like, I think longer term, we need to have like things like 20% time at work to learn, for example, right? I don't think it's going to be sustainable continuing forward to tell people to just learn new things on their own time. Like, that's not
Yeah,
towards parents, right? But just things like that as an industry, like we have to start instituting and standardizing, because we have to make space for the fact that, hey, software engineering or being a technologist is like something that you're always learning forever and ever. You have to commit to being a lifelong student, right? So how do we now make space for that lifelong student at work? Because it's not sustainable for me to take away 20% or 30% of your family time or your personal time,
yeah,
in order to learn, right? So just things like that that are not those, they're edges that are not smoothed out in our industry. And that's because we're a very young industry. JavaScript isn't even 30 years old, for example, just to give you an example, right?
I mean, even the web is
The web,
young.
yeah, web is young, right? Web is young, and we're past our teenage years, but web as a whole is young. Software engineering compared to other industries like medicine, law, right, also very young. But
Yeah,
so I think there's going to be a lot of volatility and churn because of that. But just don't internalize all of those problems as being you. Like, you are not the problem, our industry is the problem. So I apologize that we're asking you to like enter an imperfect industry, but the opportunities in this industry are phenomenal, both from a financial perspective as well as your impact, right? Like, you're able to actually make a big impact. You're able to sustain and earn a living to support yourself and your families,
and
so
create products, that actually benefit a lot of people out there, right? Millions
exactly.
or even billions. So
Right.
that's been, really, really exciting.
Correct.
So
Yes.
leave the industry. I think that's the message that we're saying here, folks.
Yes.
And, companies obviously have got a lot of, what do you call this, responsibility here to make sure that they support, for example, people like us who are doing things to kind of help change the picture, change the ratio. But we're just individuals, right? Even though we're passionate about things that we do, we don't have all the resources that, especially bigger companies, have. I remember, one time when I actually started this conference like 5 years ago, I just realized we were on our fifth year. I was actually asking for support for one of the conferences, and I got a note from one company. And the next day, I was reading the news, and they were saying they were announcing that they're like a 3 trillion worth a company. And I say to myself, I'm just asking for like a little bit so that I can actually pay for the venue,
Yeah,
pay
yeah, 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 yeah.
for this conference. This because in person, when this was in person, this conference, we were not even charging for tickets. I tried it once in Taiwan, because I was pre-pandemic. I wanted to roll this out to other regions, and I was so unhappy when we actually started charging for tickets, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'd like to keep this free, but then again, we need support from companies.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
otherwise I'm digging into my savings. So it's I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Companies have
yeah,
a responsibility to help us.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I think, that's really interesting. Like, what's interesting, Jen, is like not all companies also have a level of maturity where where they are giving back to the community, both like in terms of like their contributions back to the open source community in terms of like either financial or
Yeah,
support, just having their engineers contribute back, but also, yeah, just community, right? Like, it's super important for them to like contribute to that, both because they benefit from it both, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah,
employees benefit from the community, their employees benefit from open source, their employees need resources like this lovely conference, right? Like, in order to kind of like help shape their understanding and help their professional development, so those are all really important things. And like, companies shouldn't see that as optional, because it's like all part of the same ecosystem. Like, our whole industry is like ecosystems of community, open source, like, all of these things are like interrelated. You can't really just like silo yourself and do one, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah, exactly.
we're
I
doing
mean,
things where employees are learning and growing. And,
to kind of convince companies sometimes, and what actually really helps me sometimes is that having people within the organization who are actually advocates for for this type of events, this type of
Right.
community efforts.
Right.
Because that way they're closer to the people who are actually gonna decide, to say yes, we're gonna support this and that. But yeah, it's been really difficult, and um, but still, I don't want to start charging, women for tickets just to attend this conference, especially when we go back in person, where the cost is a lot higher. For example, like like a venue we hired here in London, because we had 1,300 plus, 1,400 plus attendees. I had to hire, a really really expensive venue because they had all the rooms that we needed. So it was really really, really tough to to ensure that moment of
Yeah.
event. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, that's
anyway,
I
it's
I mean, like I said, this is like community and learning is all core. I mean, these are all like you have employees from lots of different companies that are participating as the audience members and speakers, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, yeah, companies should acknowledge that, like, and have official sponsorship and budgets towards
Sorry, yeah,
events
yeah,
like yours, because I'm
yeah.
sorry, yeah. I'll tell you once that one day in the future, if I start a company, Jen, you have my sponsorship. So
Perfect. Yeah.
telling you in advance.
It cannot be Jen always sponsoring, her own events, right? So
Exactly.
we obviously have some support from companies. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah, of course you do. Yeah.
yeah, when we go
I
back
think
in
people
person,
could be doing more, right? That's the
it'd be
thing.
tougher when we go back in person because of all the the actual costs that we incur, even though we're not charging for tickets. All right. Well, thanks, Amal. It's been really enjoyable speaking with you about your career, about your company, and about the programs in the community that you're involved with. So I really hope that our audience today learned a lot from that. And happy International Women's Day to you
Yeah.
again, and to
Happy
everyone.
Day to you. Gosh, we started this industry, Jen. This tech is ours, so we need to reclaim it as women. Okay. So,
All right. Thanks, Amal, again, and I'll see you hopefully soon in person.
yes, hopefully. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care and enjoy your day.